is an element of reinventing the wheel about it. One of the things I understand that the Starmer team is emphasising, he sees a new mechanism to make the purchase and procurement and designation of equipment and various disciplines, logistics, communications, and so on, connected with this inner European core to the European alliance, which is NATO / EU. We've had all that before.
Now, world leaders are gathering for the Munich Security Conference. And if we hark back to last year, it was an extraordinary moment. We had J.D. Vance launching this real broadside at his European host. And of course, that was a precursor for what has then kind of sort of followed over this last year. And we've seen a lot of that in just January of this year. President Trump and Putin had just had their very long phone call. In fact, I remember being on air at the time, and we took J.D. Vance's speech live, and it was quite extraordinary. I think we had William Browder on the line with us. It was an extraordinary moment, but it is an important moment for world leaders to gather. Keir Starmer is going to be meeting with President Macron and the German Chancellor as well. Now, Keir Starmer is expected to make a case for the UK and Western allies to come together and sort of forge some kind of multinational defence initiative which could help oversee joint weapons procurement and potentially drive down the costs of, rearmament. And the Prime Minister is going to call for closer defence cooperation in his speech tomorrow. Well, let's now catch up with Robert Fox. Robert is defence editor at The Standard. Hello, Robert.
Hello.
So what is the mood this year? And last year was such a kind of extraordinary gathering. How are people feeling this year?
Well, I think I'm not there, and I have to emphasise I'm watching this from London because I'm watching so many other things which are as important in the defence and security world. I think that the view is, and such is the number of people gathering there, it's last year's event, part two, after the commercial break, as it were, because we understand, for example, that Rubio, the Secretary of State, is meeting with the representation from Denmark over Greenland, and there will be this discussion led by the E3, as they're now known, the European three, Macron, Merz and Starmer, trying to forge some real coherence into the European leadership of NATO. This is a sort of NATO bis, NATO Part 2, which is urgently needed. But it's not all harmony and light, because from the other parties, there is a lot of criticism of the extremely obscure and ambivalent posturing of Keir Starmer about defence and security in general. After all, he hasn't even given us a clue about how he's going to fund his strategic defence review, which is the keystone, as he said at the time last June when it was unveiled, to his defence, security and foreign policy.
And he's expected to make this case for this multinational defence initiative. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are, it's a bit strange because there is an element of reinventing the wheel about it. One of the things I understand that the Starmer team is emphasising, he sees a new mechanism to make the purchase and procurement and designation of equipment and various disciplines, logistics, communications, and so on, connected with this inner European core to the European alliance, which is NATO / EU. We've had all that before. There have been other agencies like OCCA and so on. There are plenty of things in place. The real question is, are you going to put your money where your mouth is? And at the moment, as I said, and particularly in the UK terms, things are pretty depleted. Germany, Poland, for example, and to an extent Finland, and they are three crucial powers, are really ramping up their ability. The problem is that actually things, as I said before, are looking pretty hollowed out in Britain's military capability, and the way things are drifting on, they're even hollowing out a little bit more.
And final question to you, Robert. I mean, we obviously have had this year of the threads of these geopolitical alliances really being pulled ever since, the Security Conference last year. There's been lots of summits. There's been lots of, getting together in terms of trying to do peace talks on Ukraine. And, there's been some limited success with Gaza, although people feel that, there's not a solution there. Does it feel like we're still very much in kind of talking shop mode on dealing with a lot of these big issues, that we're not really making that much progress?
I have to do a Vicky Pollard, Little Britain on you. Yeah, but no, but. And there's an awful lot that has happened since the last Munich a year ago, namely the national security strategy, the way that the major Trump initiative to get real talks going. There's been yet another offer, as you know, in the last 48 hours to get real talks going on Ukraine, the summit in Alaska, which was really very important for what it really didn't deliver. There's a war going on in Europe, and we're going to have to live with that war for a very long time. That we have the new national security strategy in which it's America first, our hemisphere, Europe must get on to do with what it has for itself. Yet if you look at it, America is looking a bit overstretched, and it's going to need its European allies. Yes, there's a lot of rethinking going on. There's a lot of debate about nuclear and so on, but we've got to prepare ourselves, and I mean all of ourselves, for going into the age where AI, autonomous weapons, and finally quantum are going to dominate. And hearing the jaw that's going on in Munich, we're not preparing ourselves with much hurry for that.
Well, look, Robert, always good to catch up with you. Thanks very much for your time. That's Robert Fox, defence editor at The Standard. Someone's message in saying, rather convenient for Starmer to be parading around the world stage. If he had any shred of judgment, he would be concentrating on his domestic issues and sending the defence secretary to Munich.